I never imagined that my own commander would bury me alive before the enemy even tried. That night, kneeling on the cold asphalt, with the rotor wash throwing sand in my face, I tasted the sharp, metallic tang of betrayal. It wasn't the mission that broke me. I could handle mortars and IEDs. It was the moment I saw Captain Elias glance at Sergeant Torres, a silent, knowing conspiracy passing between them. I realized they were already planning to steal everything I had risked my life to secure. They weren't just taking the credit. They were actively planting the evidence that would label me, the man who saved their asses, as the liability, the incompetent fool who had bogged down the entire operation. I was a ghost at my own victory. I was just a specialist, Caleb Vance. Not a rookie, not a hero. Just a gear in the machine of the 2nd Platoon, Viper Company. My specialty wasn't explosive entry or close quarters combat. It was reconnaissance and tactical design. I was the guy who could look at a satellite image, cross-reference it with 3 different intelligence sources, and identify the single flaw in the enemy's defensive line, the tiny sewer pipe or the forgotten service tunnel that everyone else ignored. My life was lines on a map and risk equations. The base was nothing more than sun-baked concrete and the distant, constant hum of generators. This was Forward Operating Base Spearhead, deep in the Paktia Province desert. We were a mixed group, Viper Company, but we were tight, bound by sweat and the fear of the unknown. That bond, I would soon discover, was conditional, easily snapped by ambition and a pencil in the right hands. Captain Elias was our commanding officer. Polished, West Point educated, he had the perfect profile. Tall, calm, a leader whose only visible flaw was his insatiable hunger for promotion. Everything, every mission, every report was a stepping stone for him. Then there was Sergeant Torres, a man who had been passed over for promotion too many times. Torres was pure brute force, powerful, loud, and utterly resentful of anyone who possessed the kind of analytical, quiet skill he lacked. And I, the quiet specialist, the map guy, was a threat to both of them in different ways. Elias needed the perfect, clean mission report for his file. Torres needed validation that brute force trumped tactical nuance. I was stuck between their ego and their ambition. I knew, even before the mission began, that something would have to give. The mission, codenamed Operation Chimera, was a surgical strike. Our target, a mid-level HVT, high-value target, operating out of a fortified compound nestled in the mountains. The complex was tricky, ringed by deep ravines and accessible only by 2 known routes, both heavily monitored. The initial plan, straight from Central Command, was a conventional, high-risk frontal assault. It was the kind of plan that looked good on a briefing slide, but smelled of guaranteed casualties to anyone on the ground. When Elias gave us the briefing in the small, concrete block room, I saw the lines of doubt on the faces of the more experienced NCOs. The room was tense, lit only by the harsh white light of the projector on the tactical map. The risks were impossibly high. I remember staring at the 3D terrain model on the table, tracing the enemy's established patrol routes with my finger. I didn't raise my hand immediately. I knew better. A specialist challenging a captain's plan, even an inherited one, was career suicide, or worse. But I also knew that plan was a massacre waiting to happen. I saw the flaw, an almost vertical ridgeline, marked as impassable by preliminary reconnaissance, that could offer us a 90-degree flank approach, bypassing the main kill zone entirely. The ridge wasn't impassable, it was just incredibly difficult, the kind of terrain that required a climbing team, silence, and absolute focus. I ran the numbers in my head. A slower approach, perhaps 4 extra hours than the main route, but with a 70% reduction in exposure to direct fire. "Sir," I finally said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence of the briefing room. Every head in the room, including Torres's, snapped toward me. I felt the familiar spotlight pressure, the need to not sound like a fool. With respect, the west approach is designed to funnel us into the kill zone at checkpoints 4 and 5. If we commit a small element on the north ridge, the one labeled vertical, exclusion, we can fix their attention with a feint on the west while the main force gets a clean drop on the compound's blind side. I paused, pointing to the spot on the map. The room was in complete silence. It's a 4-hour extended march, but the entry differential is near 0. We hit them from the one direction they aren't looking. Captain Elias looked at the map, then at me. His expression was unreadable. a mix of annoyance and intrigue. Torres, standing rigid by the door, just grumbled. I felt the familiar weight of his disapproval, like a rock in my gut. He believed in kicking the door down, not picking the lock. But Elias was interested in results, not methodology. Not really. He saw the logic, the clean kill. He saw the potential for a flawless execution he could write up later. "Specialist Vance," Elias said, leaning over the map, his voice low, which was always more dangerous than his shout. "The North Ridge is not in the mission parameters. It's too slow, too risky for a main force detachment, and frankly, it's above your pay grade to recommend such a major tactical change." He said pay grade with distinct emphasis, a subtle reminder of my place. But then, he looked back at the map, running the scenario. However, if we split the force, a minimum reconnaissance element on the West Road to simulate the original approach, and the main assault team takes the ridge after all, that gives us the element of surprise. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "That gives me the surprise. Damn it, Vance, I like the idea." He turned to the operations sergeant, ignoring Torres completely. "Modify the plan. Torres, you take the 5-man decoy team on the west approach. Vance, you stick with me, leading the main force over the ridge. Your concept, your on-the-ground leadership." A cold wave of dread washed over me, despite the minor victory. I knew, the moment the words left his mouth, that I had just signed 2 documents, the mission plan and my own political execution order. Torres's face was dark, a brewing storm of fury and humiliation. I had stolen his moment, and now I was being promoted temporarily above him. He didn't just hate me for the strategy, he hated me for the attention. It was in that moment that the alliance between Elias and Torres, an alliance forged in Elias's need for a strong second and Torres's need for approval, solidified against me. I felt my chest tighten. I didn't know it then, but it was the moment they marked. Me as a traitor to their own self-serving ambition. The mission was a success before it even started, and my fate was sealed, regardless of the outcome. I had given them the flawless execution they desired, and they made sure I would pay for the privilege of saving their lives. The operation was a textbook execution, a silent, stressful climb up the impossible slope of the North Ridge. I led the first rope team, my boots finding purchase on the loose shale, my entire body fighting the weight of my gear. The air was thin, cold, smelling of pine and damp earth. Every few paces I would stop, checking the coordinates on my handheld GPS, cross-referencing them with the thermal image from the hovering reconnaissance drone, the eye in the sky, that was painting the compound's perimeter for us. The silence was deafening, broken only by our ragged breathing and the occasional scrape of metal on rock. It was exhausting, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. I was operating on pure instinct, guided by the map in my mind. We reached the drop point at 03 Wewano, exactly on my projected timeline. Below us, the compound was a dark, silent maze, completely unaware of the knife hovering over its throat. I signaled the stop. Captain Elias was right behind me, his face streaming with sweat, his breathing ragged. He gave me a dry nod, a momentary flash of professional respect. "Perfect, Vance. You were right. They didn't even look up here. The breach itself was flawless." We skirted the main gate, entering through a weak point I had identified on the compound's back wall. A small concealed maintenance access. Total surprise. The HVT was neutralized in 3 minutes. No friendly casualties. Minimal resistance. We secured the intelligence cache and began the extraction phase. It was a win, clean and unequivocal. My plan had worked perfectly. I felt a surge of pride, a sense of deep professional satisfaction that trumped the physical exhaustion. But then, things went sideways. Not because of the enemy, but because of ego. As we consolidated the prisoners and the intelligence, we got the radio call from Torres and the decoy team on the West Road. They had encountered an unexpected contact, a small but heavily armed militia patrol. Torres, in his impatience and desire to look like he was doing something crucial, had strayed from the designated holding pattern. He engaged prematurely, escalating the skirmish into an all-out firefight that was now drawing attention to our main location. "Viper 1, this is Viper 2. We are heavily engaged. Need immediate suppression. Repeat, immediate suppression. We're pinned down." Torres's voice was strained, panicked, crackling in my earpiece. Captain Elias's face went white. He knew this was the screw-up that would ruin his perfect after-action report. He grabbed the radio. "Torres, hold position. Do not move. Do not compromise extraction." But Torres, the loud, aggressive sergeant, didn't follow the order. Driven by fear and perhaps a desperate need to redeem his secondary role, he ordered his men to advance, attempting an aggressive maneuver that was not part of the plan. It was reckless, and it was a catastrophic mistake. We heard the distinct, high-pitched thud of an RPG impact over the radio. Then, silence, followed by a frantic burst of static, and then a chilling voice. "Two down! Medic! We need a medic!" Elias had to make a command decision, and he made the right one. He ordered an immediate, rapid withdrawal, leaving a small Overwatch team behind to cover Torres's extraction, should he survive. It was cold, brutal, and strategically necessary to save the main force and the high-value intelligence. I watched the clock on my wrist. Torres's reckless action had cost us 15 minutes of crucial extraction time and put 2 of his men on the ground. It was a failure of discipline, a direct violation of command protocol, and a near-fatal error. Back in the relative safety of the extraction bird, Captain Elias was visibly furious, his perfect mission report shattered by Torres's reckless screw-up. The extraction was successful but messy, overshadowed by the casualties. As the bird lifted off, a sense of deep unease settled over me. I looked at Elias, then at the wounded Torres, who was being loaded onto a stretcher. His face was a mask of pain and defiance. Later, as the debriefing began, the narrative started to shift, slowly and subtly, like sand under pressure. Elias called me into a small side room first. "Vance," he said, his voice low, measured, and dangerously calm. "Your Ridge plan was excellent. It secured the HVT, but the overall mission was compromised by the delay in the extraction phase. Sir, the delay was caused by Sergeant Torres engaging the militia against direct orders and outside the holding pattern," I stated, simply reciting the timeline. Elias leaned across the metal table, his eyes locked on mine. "The delay, Specialist, began when we added 4 hours to the approach time by taking the North Ridge. The longer we were on the ground, the higher the risk of incidental contact. Had we taken the original route, we would have been airborne before that patrol came anywhere near Torres's range." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. He was twisting the narrative. The 4-hour approach was the reason we weren't all killed in the frontal assault. "Sir, the original route guaranteed exposure in the kill funnel at checkpoints 4 and 5. My plan: reduce the risk to 0 in the ingress phase. But it increased the total time on target, Vance," he insisted, his voice hardening. "And in this game, time is life. The preliminary report will reflect that while your initial concept was utilized, the extended time caused by the unconventional route you advocated was a contributing factor in the subsequent contact and casualties suffered by the quick reaction force. You bogged down the team, Specialist. You know that, don't you?" He was going to blame my strategy for the casualties, using the very success of the ingress as the reason for the extraction failure. Torres, the one who actually disobeyed orders and caused the firefight, would be reframed as the hero who held the line while the main force withdrew. It was a perfect, self-serving betrayal. I stood there in silence, the full weight of the injustice crashing down on me. I knew then that Captain Elias wasn't just protecting his career, he was sacrificing mine to polish his own metal. I walked out of that room with the realization that I had saved the platoon, but I had fundamentally failed to save myself from the politics of the chain of command, and the worst was yet to come. The fall was swift, brutal, and clinically executed. Within 48 hours, the official after-action report, AAR, was finalized and distributed up the chain of command, a polished masterpiece of calculated deception. I read the summary myself in the operations center, the words feeling like sandpaper on my eyes. The report praised Captain Elias's bold tactical maneuver for utilizing a previously discounted high-altitude ingress that successfully secured the HVT. Torres, the sergeant who nearly got 5 men killed, was lauded for his valiant and decisive defensive action under heavy fire, which allowed the main force to complete its extraction. And me, Specialist Caleb Vance? I was a footnote, a cold, hard line of text on page 5. Specialist Vance's initial tactical recommendation, while utilized, required a significant extension of the time on target, TOT, due to the nature of the terrain. This extended window of exposure contributed to the unforeseen contact and subsequent casualties suffered by the quick reaction force. I had been erased. My strategy, the one that guaranteed the primary mission success, was repackaged as a risky decision by the commander. My contribution was turned into the cause of the casualties, not the prevention of a greater disaster. Torres's mistake was buried under a pile of heroic language. It was a classic military maneuver. Control the narrative, control the truth. They had stolen my victory and handed me the blame for their own failure. The effect was immediate and devastating. I became a pariah. When I walked into the chow hall, conversation stopped. The guys in the platoon, men I had just fought alongside, avoided eye contact. Torres, now walking with a cane and a newly created narrative of heroism, would look at me with a sneer, a silent, sickening acknowledgement that he had won. "Hey, map guy," he shouted across the barracks one night, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Got any more brilliant plans to get us shot? Maybe next time stick to sweeping the floors, huh?" I felt the deep humiliation like a physical blow, a constant ache in my chest. My career, the one I had built with precision and loyalty, was unraveling. My next evaluation was marked needs improvement and questionable judgment in high stress environments. The possibility of me attending Officer Candidate School, OCS, my long-term goal, evaporated. I was functionally blacklisted, stripped of responsibility, and relegated to inventory duty and cleaning out weapons depots, the military equivalent of indefinite grounding. My honor, my reputation, my sense of belonging, all gone. I remember sitting alone on my bunk, staring up at the stark white ceiling, feeling the absolute zero of despair. The injustice wasn't just external, it was internal. The army was my family, my purpose. I believed in the chain of command, in the concept of semper fidelis, but Elias and Torres showed me the dirty underside, the petty feuds and self-serving ambition that could crush an honest soldier. I felt my inner thoughts spiraling in a dark, suffocating turmoil. Was it worth it? Did I save them only to destroy myself? The doubt was insidious, a worm eating away at my confidence. I was scared, not of the enemy, but of the people I was supposed to trust. I was alone, surrounded by men who looked at me with suspicion. I was a victim of friendly fire, shot down by the very system I swore to protect. One afternoon, I was assigned to clear out the operations center storage, a humiliating chore. As I sifted through old equipment, I stumbled upon a stack of discarded hard drives and a heavy, reinforced metal box. It was stenciled, "Drone Recon Black Box, Do Not Wipe." My heart gave a sudden, sharp lurch against my ribs. The eye in the sky remembered the drone perfectly. It was a custom, high-end reconnaissance model that flew a tight surveillance circuit over the target area for the entire operation. It was designed to record everything in high-definition 4K, all for the official post-mission analysis that most junior officers rarely bothered with. They focused on the radio logs and the paper AAR. But that drone, I knew, recorded the truth. It recorded the timeline in minute, uneditable detail. It recorded me leading the assault up the North Ridge. It recorded Captain Elias nodding in approval. And most importantly, it recorded the full, unedited radio communication and the thermal footage of Torres's sector, the moments leading up to, during, and immediately after his catastrophic mistake. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a sudden, powerful shift from despair to focused intensity. They had written the history on paper, but the drone had written it in digital ink. The real AAR, the one that mattered, was right there, heavy and cold in my hands. Elias and Torres, in their haste to bury the inconvenient truth and blame me for the 4 hours of extra exposure, had completely forgotten about the drone's mandatory, non-negotiable recording protocol. The recording was housed in a separate tamper-proof module, the black box. I didn't steal it. I didn't need to. I simply placed it back on the shelf, my eyes tracing the "do not wipe" warning. They ignored it because they didn't think anyone would look for the truth, secure in their command authority. But I knew. I had the silent, irrefutable evidence. I stood up straight. I was no longer the target. I was the ambush. I had found my strength, not in fighting them head-on, but in quiet, tactical awareness. The very skill they used against me. I held the trump card, but I had to play it perfectly. I had to wait. I walked out of the storage room. The feeling of humiliation was still there, but now layered with a calculated glacial determination. My fall had been complete. My reputation shattered, but I had the tool for my rise. I was still doing inventory, still cleaning weapons, still taking Torres's sarcastic barbs in the chow hall. But now, every insult, every look of contempt, every word of the fabricated AAR was fuel. I was no longer a victim. I was an asset, waiting for the right moment to be triggered. I knew that justice would not come unless I took it myself. The black box was the key to my redemption. I was locked in a waiting game with my own command, and I had the only piece of hardware that mattered. I spent the next 2 weeks functioning around the base, a ghost waiting to manifest. I absorbed the routine, the rhythm of the command staff, and most importantly, the logistics of the official review process. I knew that following any operation involving casualties, a mandatory top-level debriefing was scheduled with division headquarters officers. They would review all available data, and the black box, the one I had held in my hands, was supposed to be part of that data. I just needed to ensure it wasn't conveniently lost or overlooked. My opportunity came through Major Hayes, the battalion intelligence officer. Hayes was a neutral party, respected, aloof, and obsessed with data integrity. I had worked with him several times on pre-mission analysis. I knew he was meticulous. He was the one person in the chain of command who would demand to see all available data, not just the summarized AAR. I approached him, quietly one evening as he worked late in his office, the only sound the tap-tap-tap of his keyboard. I didn't accuse, I didn't complain, and I didn't mention the betrayal. I simply spoke to him as one technical specialist to another. "Sir," I said, standing at attention, "with respect to the Operation Chimera AAR, I have a logistical concern regarding the full data review." He looked up, surprised but receptive. "Specialist Vance, proceed." "Sir, the complexity of the mission involved the deployment of the long-range high-definition reconnaissance drone, Unit 7 Alpha. Per Protocol B4, the tamper-proof data module, the black box, holds the full, unedited timeline, thermal, and radio logs. I haven't seen the manifest, sir, but I am just ensuring that the complete raw data from Unit 7 Alpha is included in the packet for the division review next week. That system provides the most accurate, impartial record of events, specifically related to the timing of the extraction and the subsequent QRF contact." I didn't need to say anything more. I had injected the specific critical detail into the mind of the one person who would act on it. I had used technical protocol, not emotional accusation. Major Hayes blinked, his analytical mind processing the data gap. "Unit 7 Alpha, black box," he murmured, making a note. "You're right, Vance. That raw data is non-negotiable for a full tactical assessment of the timeline. I will ensure it is included. Thank you, Specialist." Dismissed. I rendered a sharp salute and walked out, my heart beating a furious rhythm against my ribs. The trap was set. Now, I waited for the detonation. The division review was scheduled for the following Monday. I wasn't invited, of course. I was still assigned to inventory, but I knew the protocol. The review would happen in the main conference room, with Captain Elias, Sergeant Torres, Major Hayes, and 2 colonels from division headquarters. I spent the morning counting ammo boxes, trying to slow my breathing, but the tension was a stretched wire in my gut. Around 14 hours, a runner burst into the armory, looking frantic. "Vance, Specialist Vance, the captain needs you in the conference room. Now." I walked the few hundred yards to the command building, my boots scraping on the concrete, feeling a sense of absolute calm. I knew exactly what was happening. I was about to witness my own justification. When I entered the conference room, the atmosphere was thick, charged, with a sudden, volcanic tension. Captain Elias was standing rigid, his face pale, his eyes locked on a large monitor displaying a thermal image. Sergeant Torres was seated, his jaw slack, looking like a man who had just seen a ghost. The 2 colonels from division headquarters, Colonels Pierce and Hammond, were grim and silent, their expressions cold. Major Hayes stood near the equipment, a faint look of professional vindication on his face. The screen showed the drone's thermal footage, with a small digital clock ticking in the corner. I instantly recognized the image, the disastrous QRF contact. "Specialist Vance," Colonel Pierce said, his voice flat and authoritative. "Please approach the monitor." I stepped forward. The footage showed a small cluster of heat signatures, Torres's men, at a specific coordinate. The screen also displayed the corresponding time-stamped radio log, which Major Hayes had meticulously synchronized. "Captain Elias," Colonel Pierce continued, ignoring me for a moment. "Your AAR states that Sergeant Torres engaged the militia at 03:22 hours, while providing cover for the main force's delayed extraction. Your report emphasizes the heroic nature of the action. Elias swallowed hard, his collar looking too tight. That is correct, Colonel. He held the line. Colonel Pierce pointed a thin finger at the screen. The timestamp read, 03:15. The radio crackled with a clear recording of Captain Elias's voice. Torres, hold position. Do not move. Do not compromise extraction. Then, the footage showed Torres's men moving rapidly out of their concealed position, contrary to the explicit order. The corresponding radio log, clearly stamped at 03:16:30, was Torres's voice. We're not waiting. Advance, 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 followed by the sound of heavy outgoing fire, and then the RPG impact at 03:18. Captain Elias, Colonel Pierce stated, his voice a hammer blow. This footage, provided by the mandatory 7 Alpha black box, indicates that Sergeant Torres engaged the enemy 7 minutes after receiving a direct order to hold position. His action was not defensive. It was an unauthorized aggressive maneuver that led directly to the casualties. Furthermore, the AAR states the main force extraction was delayed due to the North Ridge approach. Specialist Vance, what was your projected extraction time from the compound? I didn't hesitate. Sir, the original extraction window was 03:10 to 03:20 hours. We were at the extraction point. Secure, at 03:05. I paused. Elias's face was frozen. Sir, extraction was 5 minutes ahead of schedule. It was Torres's unauthorized engagement that forced the extension of the overall mission duration and led to the subsequent tactical confusion. The room was silent. Elias's carefully constructed lie had been gutted by the cold, impartial reality of the drone footage and the time-stamped radio logs. The colonel turned his gaze, heavy with disappointment and anger, toward Captain Elias. Captain, he said, the word dripping with acid, the black box data clearly shows that the extended time on target you claimed was a risk factor was, in fact, the reason the HVT was secured without a single casualty to the main team. It provided complete surprise. Your claim that Specialist Vance's tactical design contributed to the casualties is unequivocally false and contradicted by your own orders and the timeline of events. You attempted to cover up Sergeant Torres's insubordination, a cover-up that would have destroyed the career of an excellent soldier. Sergeant Torres stood up abruptly, his face contorted. Sir, I was trying to save my men. Colonel Pierce cut him off with a gesture. Silence, Sergeant. You broke command, and 2 of your men paid the price. Your actions are being referred for court-martial proceedings based on insubordination and improper conduct. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Torres wilted, his bravado instantly draining away, replaced by the bitter realization of his fate. The colonel then turned to Captain Elias. Captain, your career is over. You knowingly fabricated an AAR, betrayed the trust of your command, and attempted to scapegoat a subordinate to save your reputation. Your record will reflect a formal loss of confidence, and a full investigation into your command decisions and reporting integrity is underway. I want your resignation on my desk by 08:00 tomorrow. Elias didn't speak. He just looked at me, his eyes wide with a sudden, desperate, defeated appeal. He was looking for mercy from the man he tried to bury. I just looked back at him, the calm intensity of my gaze unwavering. I took no satisfaction in his defeat, only a deep sense of restored balance. The truth, silent and objective, had done the work for me. Colonel Pierce finally turned to me, the tone of his voice shifting from cold fury to genuine respect. Specialist Vance, your professionalism and adherence to protocol even under unjust and extreme pressure are on the record. You saved this mission, you secured the HVT, and you discreetly brought the truth to light. I will personally ensure your records are corrected, and your recommendation for OCS will be fast-tracked. You are dismissed. I executed a crisp salute. Sir, thank you, sir. I walked to the door, leaving the silence behind. I opened the door, but turned back. The whole room watched. I walked out of that room, leaving behind the wreckage of 2 men's careers, not with a feeling of vengeance, but of deep catharsis. I wasn't just cleared, I was seen. The injustice had been undone by the silent testimony of the machine. The days that followed were a blur of corrected paperwork, formal apologies, and the quiet restoration of my honor. The men in the platoon, initially cautious, slowly began to look at me differently, with respect, recognizing the quiet strength it took to bear the burden of the truth and let the facts speak for themselves. The betrayal left a deep scar, But the recovery taught me an invaluable lesson. I realized that the biggest battles in the military are not always fought on the front lines with rifles and grenades. They are often fought in the sterile environments of briefing rooms, in the politics of promotion, and in the constant silent war for control of the narrative. My commanders tried to teach me that loyalty was a shield, but they taught me the opposite. Loyalty is a weapon that can be turned against you by those whose ambition outweighs integrity. I lost a piece of my innocence that day. I lost the naive belief that the system would always correct itself. It doesn't. Justice, I learned, is not an automatic outcome. It is the result of deliberate action, of ensuring that the irrefutable, objective truth is placed in the path of the lie. I had to become tactical, not just against the enemy, but against the decay within my own ranks. I held the line, not with a gun, but with the cold, hard data of a surveillance drone. That quiet, analytical skill they resented was the very thing that saved my life and my honor. I accepted the promotion, went to OCS, and eventually became an officer. But I never forgot the feeling of that cold knot of despair, the sense of being erased. It was a constant reminder. So I learned to value facts above feelings, and to trust the objective record more than any polished testimony. I learned that the highest form of discipline is not obedience to a flawed command, but obedience to the truth. The betrayal was an agonizing lesson, but it forged me into a better, more cautious, and fundamentally more ethical leader. I know now, with absolute certainty, that no matter how sophisticated the lie is, there is always a silent record, an undeniable piece of evidence waiting to be found. And that is where you make your stand. Where loyalty ends, justice begins.